Hi, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston, and we appreciate you all being here. Today, we are going to talk about a couple things. The Mets' seven-game win streak, followed by their loss last night, what's going on with Mark Vientos and the kids, deadline rumors, and more. So thank you again for being here. Hello, Ashley. You can see we're on Zoom right now. Maybe tell our viewers why that is.
Hello. Yeah, so sorry I missed you all. I know intern Dan filled in wonderfully after Sunday Night Baseball. He is always a delight to make a little appearance. It's summer vacation season. What can I say, folks?
True slacker.
We
That's
are
why.
hashtag WFH, work from home today. So we are working from wherever I am. We'll leave that up to your imagination.
That's right. Okay, we're gonna get into last night's game first because my God, that was so interesting. The Padres snap a Mets seven-game win streak, which ties their longest win streak for this season. A wild, truly wild walk-off win. It was tied 1-1 in the top of the fifth. And let's just maybe take a pause here. Mark Vientos, after almost, nearly, I mean, really hitting a two-run home run, but it was robbed, then goes back up to the plate and hits a grand slam. And now Mets lead 5-1. What'd you think when that happened?
Yeah, so I wanted to start with last night's game because obviously the win streak is snapped, but I mean, what a game that was. All that to end in a 7-6 loss. It was quite the back and forth. And we need to talk about Mark because here's the thing. Mark Vientos has seen the rumors, all right? Mark Vientos is on social media. He has heard the chatter this past week ahead of the trade deadline. You said it. He misses the home run by I think it was Fernando Tatis Jr. out there, right? Reels it
Yep.
back in, misses it by like a couple inches, and then he hits it to nearly the exact same spot in the bottom of the fifth grand slam. Mark Vientos has a little spite about him. Mark Vientos has a little flair. When you do something that Mark Vientos feels like, is slighting him in a way, he's gonna get back at you because they walk McNeil intentionally to get to him, and he took that personally, just like he did in the NLCS in game two. Um, I don't know. I mean we can get into more of like the Vientos rumors here now, but like he responds really quite well to adversity. We've seen that a few times. You can say whatever you want about, he obviously doesn't bring a lot to the table defensively. He struggled at the plate to start this year. But when we've seen Vientos hit adversity, like he has responded, right? Last year he gets sent down to start the season, then he comes back. He has a really fantastic rookie season. That is a large part of propelling the Mets to the NLCS. This year, he's probably had a horrible week, right? The guy's in the midst of a billion trade deadline rumors. He doesn't know if he's going to be a New York Met come Thursday night. And he's still out there producing. He's seen decreased playing time. He's still out there. Obviously, they didn't win the game last night, but if they would have, Vientos would have been the reason why.
Have some really interesting things to say off of that. Post game, Vientos said, I'm happy I get put in those situations. I like those situations because I tend to lock in more. That much is obvious. Through the last seven games, he's batting 333, 902 OPS, one home run, seven RBI. I think he's the kind of guy, like you said, who operates well under pressure. Whether or not his hot stretch over the past few weeks means the Mets should keep him or not is another story. But he does know about the trade rumors. As you said, I'd venture to guess this guy's pretty active on social media, seems like that kind of dude. But he had a quote that was kind of interesting on the trade rumors. He said, I feel like I've never been someone that's been liked, which is interesting because I think he's a likable guy. I feel like last year was the first year that people were rooting for me. It's no different, to be honest with you. Going up through the minor leagues, I was always that guy that nobody really counted on. Last year, I proved myself, and this year is the same thing. It's nothing new. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think to hear that, obviously, he's been really candid before this deadline, right? Maybe he didn't anticipate to be in the thick of the rumor mill as much as he has been with the Mets. Maybe he didn't anticipate to be really, we've talked so much about all the infielders that they have. Maybe he didn't think he was going to be the one who's right in the thick of the rumors. We will see if the Mets hold on to him or get rid of him come Thursday night. To me, I don't know. To me, a few bad months of Mark Vientos after he had a great breakout rookie season last year has shown those flashes of potential at the plate and obviously has this mentality. It's like, I feel like it would be giving up on Mark Vientos too soon. Now, on the other end of that coin, if you're the Mets, you know you're going to have to give up someone here to get anybody that's going to move the needle, whether that's a starting pitcher, a relief pitcher, a center fielder, whatever. We'll go through it later on. So maybe Vientos is one of the few guys you have that's attractive to other teams to deal. And in that case, you could be put in a position where you think the upside is higher to deal in. And I understand that too. I just think I've liked what I've seen from Vientos sort of at every crossroads that he's hit, right? Like I said, been a tough week. Over the last 7 games, he's hitting 333, 902 OPS, obviously in the home run yesterday, 7 RBI. It's getting hot at the right time. It's getting hot a little too late in terms of the course of the season here because it's the end of July. But Mark Vientos responds to adversity, like it or not. And if the Mets do get rid of him, I feel like I could see it becoming, a Justin Turner situation, a one of those classic, obviously Pete Crow Armstrong was a prospect, but one of those classic Mets give up on a guy too soon. And then he goes and becomes, a star, an MVP, caliber guy.
The hardest part about the trade line is that you honestly just don't know. You don't know who's going to go out and perform better with a better team versus who's great staying here. It's all a risk, and I think that's what makes it difficult. But we'll talk more about the trade deadline at the end of this episode. Let's continue on in this game because it really was a ride. I think it's important to note, at least Mark Vientos right now, you're thinking about him potentially being traded, but either way, he'll have a job. You want to talk about somebody who may be open to work pretty soon? I got a name for you. Umpire Emil Jimenez. This guy had a rough, rough night last night. And I think you both know from watching this podcast, we're not saying that because we're Mets fans. It was a goddamn rough night.
No, Emil, listen, Emil, I'm sure he has some good nights. Last night was not one of them, okay? Emil, I don't really know what game he was watching. I don't know if he maybe created a new strike zone of his own. Juan Soto was upset. Carlos Mendoza was upset. I was upset. Everybody was upset, okay? Juan Soto, as we've discussed plenty of time, has fantastic plate discipline. Obviously, that can get you into trouble here and there if you're trying to squeeze the zone a little too much, search for those walks. But he calls two pitches on Soto that were he called them strikes. They were evidently balls. The one that Soto got real pissed about that got Mendoza thrown out was like a foot above the strike zone. Like, sorry, sir, are we watching the same game? Are we partaking in watching the same game?
It was so upsetting. I can't even tell you. And honestly, out of all of the calls, the thing that annoyed me the most, and I'll be honest, I don't remember which at bat this was. I think it was one of the ones later in the game because I could tell that Emil Jimenez was already pissed off. And let's be fair. Juan Soto is known to bark at an umpire.
He has
Juan
a
Soto
bar.
is one to turn his head around.
Yeah.
He'd like to start a dialogue. He'd like to start a conversation. Not all umpires are interested in having that conversation. But this guy, Emil, it was giving, he should have been a movie star. It was giving center of attention. It was giving youngest child who didn't always get the light shined on him, or maybe older sibling. Either way, there was a point where it was another bad strike three call. I want to say it was an at bat later in the game. And truly, Emil Jimenez gave a solid like one, two, and then he hits him with a. I'm like, listen, man, call it strike three or don't. But like enough with this hesitation. Like no one's interested in the drama of this. I get it. Juan Soto could be probably a little bit more disciplined as far as the things he's saying to the umpires, but he's the player. You're the goddamn be a goddamn adult. Strike three or
Also, right. Different story if these were, I mean, you can watch the replays, you can watch the I know umps are imperfect, robo umps, the whole discussion. I mean, these pitches were a foot above the strike zone. I think that at bat that you just mentioned was Soto again later in the game, and he like kind of just stared at him. At that point, Mendoza's already out of the game. They'd already restrained Juan once, and he's just like, you know what, dude, like you're atrocious. You're awful. Mendoza, I was like sort of surprised to see him get that fired up over balls and strikes that early in the game, but at the same time I wasn't because that was 2 pitches in a row that were just awful. Post game, Mendoza said on Jimenez, quote, that was not his best day. And I'll say that that was not Emil Jimenez. It was not his best day.
I actually loved what Mendoza did because ultimately I think Mendoza knows Soto enough to know that if he would have kept barking legitimately for another second or two, his day was over. And in that kind of a game, especially when you're on a 7 game win streak, the last thing you need is one of your star players getting the boot in like the second inning or whatever it was. I'd rather Mendoza be out of there. And mind you, that game, I have to say, was poorly managed in some ways once Mendoza was out of the game,
Yeah.
but still, I'd rather that be the situation. And I think he just protected his player. I respected that.
No, I did too. I agree with you that it probably would have been time for Soto to hit the showers if Mendoza didn't swiftly come in there and say, "All right, I'm gonna save you." So all that to say, it's one game. It's well, not one. It was a few bad calls. Let's be honest with each other. But then you get into later in this game, right? Vientos. So Vientos hits the grand slam. They take the lead. Then the Padres rally all the way back to tie it and then take the lead in the ninth. You're a Mets fan. You're watching this. You're like, all right, it's all over. For Huascar Brazoban, I need to take a beat on him because he's been awful. And if he is a Met past Thursday, I am going to have a crash out send Huascar Brazoban to Siberia or the moon. I don't care which one, but it needs to be one of the two. Anyway, but then the Mets showed some fight again. Brazoban, just to lay out my case there to you, since May 23rd, he's given up 21 runs in 21 innings pitched. I mean, I could go on here if you want me to, 7.89 ERA, but like 21 runs in 21 innings pitched as a relief pitcher pretty much tells you all you need to know. So all I have to say is if Brazoban is on this team or has a critical role on this team beyond Thursday, I'm going to be upset personally. All that
Yeah.
to say, then the kids came through again. Ronnie Mauricio hits one over the wall, ties it.
Yeah, Brazoban, take him out of the ball game. That's all I have to say on that. He really has disappointed. And honestly, now that there are some other guys in the mix, I know Soto last night, we're gonna probably get into that, the pitcher, I mean.
Yes.
That being said, I think there are probably enough other guys who you could be relying on. I don't know if I want to see Brazoban anymore. Like I kind of feel like he needs to be put in timeout. It's really been a bad situation and it messed up truly the entire game. He also played bad defense. Like honestly, I don't know how much of the game you watched, but that one play where the ball went to Pete Alonso, who by the way continues to play great defense, and he tried to toss the ball to Brazoban, and Brazoban wasn't there in time. And because of that, a run scored, et cetera, et cetera. The game gets out of hand. But yes, beyond that, I guess you're thinking in your head, I'm pissed off because the Mets had a 4-run lead. How the F are we here? And why was Brazoban even still in once the game was tied up? There are a lot of questions. But you're like, okay, there's still a little bit of life here. And Ronnie Mauricio, I can't say enough good things about this guy. And honestly, even compared to like Beatty, Vientos, all of them, I feel like he's just blowing everybody out of the water right now. He's the guy who I feel like you 100% have to hold on, have to keep, need. Especially since that was such a high pressure situation. Anyway, he was going up against, I'm forgetting the name, the name of the closer is escaping me right now, but he had let up, I think, maybe 1 or 2 home runs like all year. It was nuts. Um, all that to say, yes, the game gets tied up, which is great. Then we get to Gregory Soto. This was, a make or break situation for a guy who was in his second day with the Mets. He was one strike away from getting out of the inning. Said it was a loss. That's just it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on Mauricio. I think he has to be untouchable if you're the Mets headed into Thursday. And yeah, it sucks, right? He ties the game. All right, the Mets have new life. Just to take a beat on that, the Mets are doing something that we were saying that they weren't doing the past few weeks, that little few weeks to a month slide. The Mets were not fighting back in these games. So to even see Mauricio get up there and tie it to me was very encouraging. Now, obviously, I'm upset that they lost. Let's talk about Gregory Soto for a minute. The Mets get him from the Orioles. I know you touched on it with Dan the other day. A couple of days ago, really their first trade deadline move, lefty reliever. Who does that shock? Absolutely no one. I like the Greg Soto move. It just to like start there. I think it was a smart move. He has a 3.79 ERA this year. Obviously, he gives them someone to sort of complement Brooks Raley out of the bullpen, lefty guy. 30 years old, 2 times All-Star, likely the first move of a couple of bullpen moves later on this week. But the Orioles were hashtag open to work, open to the trade deadline, and the Mets took advantage. So I like the addition. It was unfortunate last night, right? He has some defensive mishaps. He kind of like yeets the ball to first base. The ball game's over. Jose Iglesias, of all people, is trotting on in for the Padres. It was unfortunate. It was an unfortunate ending to a game that you felt like the Mets rallied from behind multiple times. But you know what? I'm not going to listen. They just won 7 games in a row. They put themselves squarely back in a really good position heading into the trade deadline. I'm not going to sit here complaining over 9 innings of baseball.
I understand. Listen, there was some good and some bad to take away from that inning with Soto. On the one hand, to your point, he did make an error. I actually think it was to second base. He tried to throw the ball and he just like way overthrew it. But even beyond that, then he actually makes a good play on another bunt to third base, gets an out, and it was a high pressure situation. He got a couple outs. He was close to getting out of that inning. But his last pitch, that I guess ultimately instead of being a strike ends up getting hit, it's a double. And to your point, Iglesias comes around and freaking scores. I mean, that hurt. I honestly had a feeling that was going to happen from like the seventh inning. I knew that somehow Iglesias would be involved. I sort of feel like for Soto, I'm not going to write him off because of that. He actually was performing well under pressure once he got into a jam. Sometimes the pitch just doesn't go your way. Like I kind of knew once there were a couple of guys on base that it was going to be challenging to get out of that situation. And I'm not going to write him off yet just because of that. So it is what it is. They were on a 7 game win streak. Let's be honest, this was a game that they could have won. And I thought Gary Cohen actually said it best, where or pitching like fielding errors, or fielding errors, I guess I should say, made by pitchers, was actually the downfall of this game. Were Brazoban and Soto not make those issues or not make those errors, I actually think that they would have won the game. So I don't know what you necessarily take away from that. In my mind, it's actually not all bad, right? Like, yes, they had a 5-1 lead and they blew it. On the other hand, they were actually down 6-5 at some point and came back. So I actually feel sort of encouraged by that performance.
Yeah, I think all there is to take away from last night's loss is the same old, right? Brazoban, if you want to pin that loss on somebody, it would be Huascar Brazoban. So they need, again, these bullpen additions, this bullpen depth to get them through those middle innings. And in some senses, those high leverage innings, right? Greg Soto, we need to come up like G Soto or something so that people know what
Yep.
I'm referring to. G Soto, they sort of added him to come into some of those more high leverage, high pressure spots. Obviously, a guy who has a track record that shows that he can handle it. Last night, it didn't go their way. So, if anything, last night's loss shows me that they need, I mean, a couple more bullpen arms. Soto was a good start for this deadline season, but if the Mets do not come away from the trade deadline with two more bullpen arms minimum, maybe three, I don't know how good you're feeling about, down the stretch.
I think that's well said. Currently, the Mets are 62 and 45. They are back to first place in the NL East. They hold a 1.5 game lead over the Phillies because, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to look it up right now to be certain, but the Phillies lost again last night, didn't they?
Yes, the Phillies have gone a little bit cold, I think. Well, I think they lost last night, but the Phillies have gone a little bit cold at the same time the Mets have gotten hot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like I said
They go to the
before,
White Sox. The White Sox. What?
oh, I know the White Sox. Shout out to the White Sox for beating the Phillies, who are a very good team. Shout out Chicago. The Mets have put themselves with this 7 game winning streak back in that sort of top tier spot in baseball, right? The month or two that had gone by, we had been saying on this podcast that they had sort of lost themselves in terms of being one of those top 5 teams in baseball. Now they're back tied to the Dodgers at 62 and 45 for the fourth best record in baseball. They're back in first place. The Phillies are back to the wild card spot. So if you're sort of David Stearns and Steve Cohen, not that you really needed to see any more evidence to know that this team was good and to know that you were going to buy heavily at the deadline, but the Mets at the same time have given you some reassurance in the last week.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into trade deadline since we are essentially 48 hours away. But wanted to say one bullet that you have here, that the fans have been really into this lately. The total paid attendance for last week's 6 game homestand at Citi Field was 254,000 people. The Mets had 4 sellouts, cleared 41,000 fans in all 6 games. I mean, Steve Cohen's got to be fired up.
Oh, I know Uncle Stevie's loving it. Yeah, the last homestand that they had last week, I mean, I just had to put that stat in there because, like, it's the middle of July. We haven't even hit the trade deadline yet. It's the dog days of summer out here, and Citi Field is jumping like it's game 5 of the NLCS every single night. I know that they know this, but if you are the Mets front office and David Stearns and Steve Cohen, like now's the time, right? The fans are into it. The Mets are in a good spot. It is time to buy heavily, maybe even I know David Stearns is risk averse, but it might be time to take a flyer or two on a risk that you might normally take if you feel like the Mets are, one or two arms, maybe a center fielder away from again being able to put themselves in a really good spot headed into the playoffs. I think the fan response this season after last year has been so great that if the Mets do anything but be really aggressively in buy now mode at the deadline, fans are going to be upset and deservedly so.
Yeah, it's time to go shopping, y'all. That's all I have to
It's high
say.
time
Let's
on
go
the
on,
clock.
let's go on a shopping trip. Okay, so let's talk about it for a minute. Trade deadline Thursday at 6 o'clock. This is one of Ashley's favorite times of the year. This is a holiday she takes off for you
Listen,
guys.
some people have Christmas morning. I have the MLB trade deadline on a random evening in July. Okay. I love the trade deadline. Like your phone's going off. It's like, I can't even keep up. I'm over here like, what did the Mets do? What happened? It's great. And I'm so excited. And I know that we are filming this on Tuesday at like 4 o'clock. It'll be out later tonight, Tuesday night. I know that we are in for quite a ride in the next 48 hours, not just for the Mets, but throughout baseball.
Passenbaum, fire me up, baby. Let's go. Passan's deadline preview regarding the Mets said among their young infielders and a farm system that has taken steps forward this year, they've got the juice to do more or less anything they please. I mean, that has to make a person like Ashley Wenskoski feel pretty good.
I mean, fire me up, more or less to do anything that they please. Vroom, vroom, let's go. Um, Very excited for the impending trade deadline, and I'm excited to hear that Jeff Passan thinks so as well. So, some rumors. Let's talk about some little bits and bobs. There's some things that have been bigger than others. I mean, what you learn about being a baseball fan through multiple trade deadline seasons is that nobody ever actually knows what's going on, right? There's rumors, there's whispers of things, there's guys that you feel like really might be dealt, and then there's not, and then there's shock surprise guys that are headed across the country that you never anticipated. So, allegedly, the Houston Astros are interested in some of the Mets infielders. No surprise. We knew that this was going to be the area that the Mets have depth to sell. The names who have been thrown around the most in that area have been Vientos and Luis Angel Acuna. Sidebar for a second on the infielder situation. The main winner of David Stern's last press conference about a week ago was a man by the name of Brett Beatty. And I could not have predicted that if I was a fortune teller. Stearns basically said that they're comfortable with Beatty at third base. And to me, if I'm Brett, that tells me that I'm not packing my bags this week.
Which is great because he literally just got married and that would be unfortunate timing.
Tough.
No, I agree. Listen, I've told you that for months. I've said that I really like the idea of keeping Brett Beatty and I felt like he could really be the one of the guys who's the future of the franchise. I don't think they should get rid of him. I've never thought that. But man, I mean, this is when you have to really start putting yourself in David Stern's shoes and trying to think about what you actually are willing to give up here. And I'm just going to ask you it flat out once because this is the only episode we'll have before the moves that happen before the trade deadline. Ultimately, would you be willing to give up Vientos or Acuna? Yes or no? If you're David Stearns.
I mean, here's the thing. I said it before. I'm hesitant on Vientos. I really feel like he is in one of those sophomore slump eras. He could really have a prime that's valuable to the Mets. Now, at the same time, as we've said a lot of times, you have a logjam. He doesn't provide you much defensively at third base. If you lock up Alonso later on this season, which fans are going to be clamoring for because he's having a good year, then where exactly does Vientos slot into that? Does he become a DH at age 24 or whatever he is? I don't know. Probably not. So if you're David Stearns, maybe you are looking at Vientos as the odd man out. That's certainly a possibility. At the same time, I still feel like there's potential and a ceiling there that I'm not ready to, see fall by the wayside. Acuna, I could see it, but Acuna is a guy that to me, for other teams, is not going to move the needle. Like you're certainly packaging Acuna with somebody else, right, to get a name that you want. Obviously, there's been rumors all week on, who they might trade Vientos for. I think right now, if you're Mark, you just have to keep your head down and sort of just see what comes to fruition. Luckily, the Mets don't play on Thursday, I would like to add, so we will not have a Wilmer Flores crying on the field situation.
Yeah, I'm not interested in having that situation. And since you brought him up and the crying, on that note, like, let's just be clear, very clear when we say that we understand that what's going on right now are rumors, but it also seems kind of silly to not discuss some of the things that are being discussed on Twitter. At the end of the day, this is a Mets fan podcast. So just know that we understand that none of this is confirmed, but we're just talking about it because we want to give our opinions. When asked about the rotation last week, Mets president of baseball operations, David Stearns, said he would mostly be interested in arms that raise the ceiling of his team. I like that. He didn't commit to making an addition, but he did express confidence in the starting five they have right now: Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, and Frankie Montas. As far as who they could be looking at, if they did want a starting pitcher, you are looking at guys like Sandy Alcantara and Dylan Cease if the Padres made him available. Do you have interest in either of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, look, Sandy, obviously his stock is going to be a little bit lower because of the year that he's had. At the same time, I think the Marlins are probably willing to deal him. And if you're the Mets, maybe you get him at a little bit more of a bargain than you would have earlier this season. I definitely think he's a guy that would fit that David Stearns quote, would move the needle, right? At the same time, he hasn't been totally the same since he had that Tommy John surgery. Wins the Cy Young in 2022, has the surgery, hasn't looked quite the same yet. He has a 6.66 ERA this year, second worst of any major league starter with at least 100 innings. So if you're the Mets and you make that addition, there's a little bit of a concern bringing him into the rotation. How is he gonna do right away? I think that this trade deadline market, he is obviously a frontline guy. I don't know if the Mets are going to be willing to give up a ton for him. Also, another name who sticks out to me, who again didn't have the performance of a lifetime against the Mets last night. If last night was his audition, he certainly didn't do great. Would be Dylan Cease of the Padres, but I'm not sure if the Padres are going to be willing to be sellers when they're finding themselves in a spot to certainly be competitive down the stretch and make a playoff push. I don't know if the Padres are going to get rid of Dylan Cease.
Yeah, I do understand that. I was seeing on Twitter on Underdog MLB that it says the biggest names likely to be traded did include Dylan Cease, and you also see Robert Jr. on there as well. So those would be names that would interest me. But like you said, with all of these guys, there's a little bit of a risk. And maybe that's why a lot of Mets fans end up feeling risk averse or feeling like they'd want to hold on to a guy like Vientos is because, you just know what you've seen from him and know what could be ahead. Obviously, with a guy like Alcantara, his resume speaks for himself, but I get a little nervous about going after an old dog. 6.66 ERA, the second worst of any major league starter with at least 100 innings. I don't know, man. I understand there's more to the story than that, but that doesn't, to quote you, tantalize me at this moment in time. I'm not so interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's all going to depend for the Mets, right? David Stearns, I don't want to call him a prospect hugger, but at every turn, he's shown I guess, tendency to hold on to things if things don't go the way that he would like in the market. So while it's very clear that the Mets need relief pitchers first and foremost, like I said, 2 to 3, you really need to move some things around in that bullpen. They also could be in the market for a starter. Like we're saying, Buster Olney said that the Mets could be in the market for a starting pitcher that's sort of in that 1 to 3 starter realm to kind of switch things up in the rotation. Now, at the same time, they've said that they're confident that Clay Holmes is going to make it through the year. That came out this week. I mean, they might be confident, but I'm not. I still don't know if I'm feeling like good old Clay is going to be out there in October, but we'll see about that. I would feel good if the Mets got at least one starter for depth purposes, 2 to 3 relief pitchers, like I said, and then the only other position that you really look at is center field. Now, if Robert Jr. is the only person available on the White Sox, I don't know what exactly kind of package the Mets would have to put together to get him, and then that's a rental. And we've also seen him. I mean, he's going to give you the power. He's going to give you certainly some more thunder in your lineup, but we've seen him sort of have his trials and tribulations at the plate as well. What are you going to give up for a rental? You know what I mean? If Jaron Duran isn't available and he's really the marquee guy in center field, I don't know. Are you willing to go with Tyrone Taylor all the way down the stretch? I guess it depends on what you're willing to give up if you're the Mets.
I know that for some people, this is not enough of a reason to not take on someone, but I don't really love Jaron Duran's personality. He doesn't really seem like a Met to me. I'm just going to say it. I don't know if chemistry wise that would be a good fit, but I understand that he's a great baseball player. All that to say, Mets have two more tonight, and tomorrow at the Padres. Then they are off on Thursday for the deadline, which is great. That aligns really well. And then they return home to host the Giants for 3 and the Guardians for 3 into next week. Ashley, any final thoughts on what lies ahead before we get out of here and see all of these fine listeners after the deadline?
Final thoughts. Obviously, I'm excited for the deadline. This seems like the Mets' time to make a push. It seems like the time for them to make a big push. Like I said, fortifying the bullpen, fortifying some of those unsure areas. And we'll see. I mean, the Mets could be a different team. They could look quite a bit different after Thursday night. So we'll see what happens. They don't play Thursday night, so that's a good thing. Everybody's totally ready to be locked into the trade deadline stuff. Also, I'll be at City Field Saturday, which is pretty fun. That's a part of this vacation extravaganza. So my once a year City Field trip, just so everybody knows, is happening this Saturday. I'm quite excited.
Wait, wow. I didn't even know that. I'm
Yeah.
jealous.
Yeah. So feeling pumped up, but also feeling I said to my sister, who I'm going with, the Mets could look a little different come Saturday. So I'm excited to see what happens there.
Yeah, they sure could. All right, well, listen, everyone, thank you so much as always for joining us. We will try and get some more content out there for you sometime after the trade deadline. We appreciate you being here. Be sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. So we will talk about the road to 10K until we get there. Otherwise, we'll see you back here when the next big thing happens. Thanks so much for joining us.